I wish those that were listening to this right now could really understand what it's like to have a true culture of training and personal development within sales and marketing.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Alex Winter, and today I'm joined by Marcus Sheridan, keynote speaker, author, partner here at Impact. Marcus, great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, let's do this, man.
Let's do it. Today we're talking about sales, and I have some really interesting stats here that John provided for us. He's talking about how marketing alignment with sales has been off for the past few years. When we start thinking about the pandemic, how it shut down offices, when we start thinking about how AI has impacted certain aspects of it, and also more stuff that can be brought without talking directly to a salesperson. So users being able to use the internet, use these tools to do self-discovery and self-research. So where do we start with this conversation when we talk about bridging sales and marketing and finding a way to...
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about the issue of alignment with sales and marketing, it has been a big problem within the business world for decades now. I mean, really, it has. But it's gotten worse, especially as as we've all gone down this rabbit hole called the internet. And if you go back to when the internet was just getting started, let's say 95, 96, 97, that time frame. Typical buyer at that point in time, they're probably, before they reach out to a company, they're probably 20, 30% through the buyer's journey before they reach out. Okay, so they're just really getting going. They learn so much about that product, about that service, once they started the conversation with the company.
Right.
The reason, of course, is they didn't have the ability to do as much research as they might have wanted to do. Right? Like we take for granted today how much research, how much vetting we can do of companies, services, products today. But man, back in the day, it just wasn't really there, right? They couldn't open up an encyclopedia. It's like maybe you get a magazine off of a shelf and say, and I'm going to try to review this car and driver or newspaper. You just couldn't really do it.
Right. And it wasn't even that long ago. We're talking 25 years ago.
Yeah, we're about 25 years, right? Yeah. It wasn't long ago. Okay, so 20, 30% through the buyer's journey by the time they reach out to a salesperson then. Today, we know we're around 80-ish%, in 2024. The question is, where's it going, right? We know this is not going to stop. So what's been fascinating is pressure has been building with marketing teams in terms of now winning the 80%. You got to win up front. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that have decent closing rates, but they're going out of business. Why? Right. Because they don't have enough leads. Why? Because the marketing isn't where it needs to be. And that's what's driving so much of the, quote, sales process today. Now, the other problem is a lot of sales teams, they're not cognizant of this shift. I mean, like inherently we all realize, I'm vetting companies, I use the internet now, but they're if you've been in sales for a while, your role in terms of the buyer's journey has steadily been diminishing over the course of the last couple of decades.
Well, it sounds like it's been flipped on its head. It went from being they knew 20% and then had to talk to you to 80%, and now it's literally the polar opposite of that.
It's totally flipped, right?
Yeah.
So what does this mean? Well, it means if a leadership team hasn't taught this to a sales team, they're going to have an overinflated value of the thing that they do. Now, listen, I'm all about sales teams, salespeople, great sales cultures. Anybody that knows me knows that's my jam, sales. With that being said, we have to understand that sales now needs to say, okay, I need to be a part of marketing. They can't start with the handshake, their job. If their job is starting with the handshake and they're not doing marketing activities, it's problematic. Marketing needs to be responsible at the same time for revenue. And they're not just, creating, fluffy arts and crafts, right? They're not just doing simple little campaigns.
Shiny object stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, they are really driving the business in many ways. And so this means there needs to be alignment, i.e. like a revenue team, that we would call it here at Impact, where the two are working together and they're constantly just being made aware of what the other side is doing. And it's really not even sides. It's like, it's like departments, if you will, of the same, it's like you get they're branches of the same tree, of course, right? And that's the approach that we've got to have. And so if again, I got to stress this though, if sales teams are not participating in marketing activities, like, for example, acting as a subject matter expert on video, it's very, very problematic to your success, because marketers, generally speaking, should not be counted on to be the subject matter expert of your company. The subject matter experts should be the subject matter experts of your company.
It sounds silly when you say it, but it happens all too often, right?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. You know how many times over the years I've heard marketing teams complain to me that they go to sales and sales says, that's not my job. This is why the most successful companies, when they have this like shift of thought and you truly see it like a revenue team, it's part of your job description. Like they put it in your job description if you're in sales. I've known a lot of really forward-thinking CEOs that did that, and it makes a really big difference, right? So that's the shift that's happened over the course of, what is 25-ish years now. Mm-hmm. It's totally flipped on its head. We've got to approach things very differently now if we're going to be successful in business. It starts with education. Both sides need to be very well educated. And I would argue, too, it starts with the education of leadership teams, because generally, almost always, 99.9% of the time, if there is resistance between sales and marketing, it's because we have a leadership problem within the organization. We don't really have a sales department problem. We don't really have a marketing. It's a leadership problem, because leadership hasn't set the standard. They haven't set the tone for, hey, this is how we need to be as an organization. And by the way, there is no other options. You have to be a part, if you're in sales, of the marketing initiative. That's your job. Right. And when I say that, it's not just subject matter expert. We're talking being engaged in social media, building the brand, because salespeople are constantly having conversations and they need to be online. They're part of that vetting process, part of that 80%, sending out videos, using marketing content in the sales process, giving marketing ideas for the type of content they should be producing, the questions, the worries, the fears that they're hearing every single day, right? This is why when marketing is having a meeting, that's a planning meeting, a salesperson should be involved, right? That is actively engaged with real life customers and prospects.
Yeah, they're on the front lines.
Yeah, they're on the front lines. They've got their ear to the ground. They know exactly what's going on. And then when sales teams are having meetings, marketing should be in there, because they're going to hear things like, hey, there's this new concern that we're dealing with. There's this competitor. There's this, there's this doubt. There's this issue out there. Whatever that thing is, new technology, new offer. Such and such company's doing this now. And so this way, they're constantly informed too. Fundamentally, they've got to be on the same page. That's what it's all about. There's really no option 2024 and beyond. If you're not on that same page, you're probably going to be in really big trouble.
So one of the key things that I took away from what you said was a revenue squad. And I'd love to dig more into what that actually means, and then also how that plays into the buy-in from like top down with leadership, and how leadership can set their teams up for success and basically implement what a revenue squad should be doing.
Yeah, you can call it whatever you want. We call it revenue teams, revenue squad. It's just different names for it. What matters is that, and the makeup is going to vary from company to company, of course. Mm-hmm. But what matters is that there are representatives from the three main areas of the business in a meeting, and that meeting is happening at worst, at a minimum, once a month. Okay? So the three areas are a representative from sales, from marketing, and then from the leadership team, right? You have to do this. And so there's different ways that you can, approach these meetings, but ultimately it goes back to what I was saying a second ago, which is sales needs to make sure that marketing understands this is the stuff we're dealing with on the front lines. Here's the issues that we're seeing. Here's the content that we're missing. Here's the tools that I need in my toolbox that I don't have, right? Because there's always those. Marketing needs to be very keenly aware of those things, but also they need to make sales aware. Hey, okay, so we're going to produce these videos. We're going to produce these articles. Who are the subject matter experts I should be talking to for this? who can give me some, and keep in mind that sometimes it's not, a subject matter expert doesn't need to be the one that, that is the thought leader on the video, on the article, whatever it is. A lot of times it's just a matter of drawing the customer stories out of that salesperson, right? So it's like, who has had experience with, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because the idea is the marketing team is always looking to highlight customer case studies, customer stories, customer journeys that relate to your typical buyer, your typical avatar, whatever you want to call it, right?
Totally.
And so, like, these are the things that you should be doing. What we don't want to have happen is we don't want a situation ever where someone on the sales team says, why did marketing produce that piece of content? I don't ever deal with that. Like, that's silly. What is that right there? We've seen that many times. I've heard of that many, many times when, like, literally the sales team has no idea why marketing produced the thing that they produced.
Right. And reversely, marketing doesn't understand why sales isn't using the thing that they produced.
That's right.
And it's the disconnect.
If you want sales to use the content in the sales process, guess what? Make them own it to a degree themselves. So if they helped produce it, if it was their idea, if they were the SME, they're way more likely to share it, to send it, to integrate it, the whole nine within their entire sales process. Now, the other thing too is, just as we're talking about, it's like you've got to, you can't just be passive about this. Like, this is something that anytime you embrace a significant initiative in a company, it takes a little bit of time. It's going to be clunky at first.
Totally.
When you have your revenue team meetings, they're not going to be just like flowing water in a stream, right?
Like your first one isn't going to just revolutionize your whole company overnight.
No.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen is it's going to galvanize the two departments together. And I think there's other activities too, like a marketing person, in my opinion, every quarter should go on some type of sales call with a salesperson.
Okay.
That just, to me, should be a standard. If they're not watching some sales calls or part of a sales call, because not everybody records their sales calls.
Which is a whole nother can of worms.
Whole other can. How in the world can they effectively understand the prospect? I mean, the success of a marketer is so contingent on their ability to empathize with and think like the buyer. That's got to happen, man.
100%. Yeah.
Right? And so, these are things that, that we see work, and obviously the leader has to be there in this meeting because it just have that voice of reason, but also bring it back to the leadership team. There should not be any situation where anybody is aloof in leadership as to what that alignment looks like and how it's going and how it's flowing. And, just there's other things that you can do for this too. Like, for example, some of this, more successful companies that we've worked with, they'll produce a newsletter that's internal where once a month it goes out from the marketing team and it talks about all the content that was produced that month. So the specific content, here's the new tools in your toolbox, but it's going to highlight, here's who helped produce it. And it's going to highlight also previous results. Like, hey, Jim in sales helped make this one video last month, such and such video, and it's already, ranking number 1 in YouTube search results, and it's gotten, 2,000 views. When you see Jim, give him a high five. Like, that's the type of thing that you can and should be doing to just improve the culture of the company, and like that feeling like,
right.
Everybody matters, is, everyone is impacting everybody else's success and well-being, right, within the organization.
I love that.
So there's lots of little things that you can do, but you've got to take it very, very seriously. Can't be passive. Can't be optional. It's it's like if you do a new initiative like EOS. Anybody that's ever done EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System,
mm-hmm.
like you have these new meetings you have to do, and it's like at first it feels like, oh, this is a pain and what a pita.
Yeah, everyone's dragging their feet a little bit at first. That's natural.
You just have to get in the rhythm, and then once people have done it long enough, then it's like, okay, this is smooth and a lot less falls through the cracks. If you look at the silos that are sales and marketing, you constantly have stuff falling through the cracks. You've got inefficiency all the time. And it's just because they don't communicate very well. And the revenue team ideally eliminates those issues, those cracks.
That makes total sense. And I love what you said about for leaders, how they can create a culture around this too, where you celebrate the wins, because we've talked about this in the past where salespeople are competitive. It's in their blood. So if you see Jim over there and his video's crushing it and his sales are going through the roof, you're going to start to nudge the other salespeople on the team, I would think, and get them going like, hey, I need to make a video like that. And hey, I want to start to play this game too, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Jim has an advantage, everybody's like, wait, hold up. I want that advantage too. And so this is how you create like that, that positive mob effect. Like, what? Hey, wait a second here. I wasn't invited to that. How come I? And it's like, hey, you got to get on board here. Yeah. Look what everybody's doing. Right. And it's that frenzy of like, we all got to be engaged in this. We all got to, do this thing. In a perfect world too, you have folks on your team that are like, hey, I want to be a part of the revenue team. You got salespeople saying, what an honor it is. Now I am our representative on the revenue team over the next 6 months. That's pretty cool. But and that can absolutely be accomplished. I mean, we've seen it accomplished before. There's no doubt about it. But that's the mindset you got to have.
Yeah, that's a great point. So for business leaders and for business owners, what advice would you give to them, I guess is a better question, for like, they may not know what their sales team is doing. They may not know what their customers really need or want. How can you get them motivated or give them some advice to like start paying attention to some of these things and like shifting their focus so that they can get a deeper understanding of how to better serve their clients?
I don't know how a business leader can lead an organization without understanding the buyer. But the longer people are in leadership, oftentimes the more distanced, the more aloof they are, ignorant of what that buyer is like. It's curse of knowledge takes over, right? You're so involved in the business, you forget what it is to be an ignorant consumer or buyer that's just trying to make a decision. That's got those questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns. Sometimes you just lose touch with trends. You might have been in sales 20 years ago, but you've been on a leadership team for the last 20 years. Sales have evolved, and you're sitting there still, talking to everybody, like it's just like thinking it's 1980, and you're teaching sales techniques from the 1980.
Do you find a lot, like you work with a lot of companies, different industries, different sizes. Do you find a lot of CEOs or business leaders tend to not have their finger on the pulse of their clientele or like what their best ideal customers are?
Yeah, I would say there's at least half the time the CEO is pretty aloof of the buyer. And when this happens, you misjudge sales and you misjudge marketing. You get annoyed with your sales team, but it's like, all right, you go sell and get to re-engage with the prospect, and then maybe you'll see that you got flaws with your product, with your offering, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
And then on the marketing side, this is why, the best leaders are the ones that attend the marketing conferences every single time.
So true.
Right?
Yeah.
The best leaders are the ones that have their sales managers attend the marketing conferences too. Mm-hmm. You know what happens when you have a sales manager that attends an event like an Inbound or comes to Impact Live or whatever the event is?
Sure.
It's like now all of a sudden it's like their whole world opens up. I remember one time I was at Content Marketing World, and I had this salesperson come up to me, and he said, Marcus, I've never been to an event before, like any event like this. And I just feel like my whole world has already changed being here for one day. Mm-hmm. And that's a salesperson.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
It's huge.
It's a big deal. But
most salespeople don't go to marketing events or content creation events like that. Yeah.
No, in fact, most don't get regular training, which is an indictment on leadership. I mean, you want to get me started and fired up. I mean, I was with the company I did a training a month ago with a company. One of the salespeople had been there 4 years. 4 freaking years, had never had any type of role play training.
Wow. None.
And none.
4 years, no training.
4 years. And yet they wonder, why are our numbers down? Why are we not closing more deals? Mm-hmm. we're so wrapped up in stinking technology and pipelines and CRMs and just analyzing the opportunities
right.
that you're literally forgetting the most, the essentials.
The fundamentals, right.
Yeah, it's like what we have is, the analogy I would make is, you've got this refrigerator and cupboard full of food and ingredients, and your employees, the only thing they know how to do is make toast.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? But it's like, oh, look, we've got all these fresh ingredients.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they haven't been taught how to do anything.
Right.
And so they're making toast.
And even if that toast is really good,
well,
what are you doing with all these other ingredients? What are you missing?
Even if it's Nacho Libre toast, it's not that good.
Yeah.
And so, we have a massive dearth of sales training, and that stems from just ignorance on the part of leadership teams, not being engaged, not being as involved as they should be across the board. And, this is one of the things that, we have to call our clients out on all the time. It's like, you got to get with it. You are aloof. You are very aloof at this point, and if you're aloof, you're not going to be an exceptional CEO. I don't care what anybody says. You're not going to be exceptional.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we talked about revenue teams. We talked about what leaders can do. Let's also talk about the shift with sales, because I think that's probably the most fascinating piece to me is watching sales members and OG salespeople that have been doing it 20, 30, 40 years that are realizing that leveraging these tools and having these meetings and doing role plays, it almost makes them like a hybrid of a marketer and a salesperson, because they're really using this content to help drive their sales. So can we talk about that shift too and what that's like for most salespeople?
Yeah, look, whenever there's change in sales, they always push back. Salespeople tend to be a prideful bunch. I can say that because that's the world that I'm from, right? Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily want to learn new systems. You talk to anybody that's tried to get their sales team to integrate a CRM, right, and do it effectively, it doesn't go well. It's always, I always laugh about that, right? Because, it's that classic Simon Sinek, start with why. And, and then if you try to explain to a sales team why they should use a CRM, you can explain why all day long, they still won't do it.
Right.
And so you can start with why, but you're going to end with, and if you don't do this, you won't get paid. And that sounds really strong.
It does, yeah.
But it's truth. Sometimes CEOs will tell me, certain things shouldn't be compulsory. Okay, so tell me your adoption of the CRM on a scale of 1 to 10. How's it going? And it's usually it's probably like a 5 or a 6. But you don't want to make it compulsory. It's like the general rule is, unless the data is in the CRM, it doesn't exist, and you don't get paid. You don't get commissions. That's how it should be with sales teams. Now, I'm not saying that you're just running a boot camp out there, but the reality is you've got to have, discipline with these things. And sometimes salespeople are slow to come around. Sometimes I've had companies reach out to me and say, hey, Marcus, can you come out and can you, do some training? Can you do this for our sales team or our marketing team, or they ask you answer work, whatever the thing is. Mm-hmm. And I'll say sales team needs to be there for at least, first half of the day. And then they'll suddenly say, I just don't know if I can do that. I don't know if my guys are going to come for 3 hours. What? Who's running this? The inmates running the asylum? I don't know if my team can be there for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And you're thinking to yourself, you're going to lose in that 3 hours. You're like, I'm going to lose a few deals. You're not thinking long-term at all. Mm-hmm. Once again, they're making toast. And you've got this filet mignon that is sitting there ready to be grilled, and nobody's using it.
Yeah.
Because you're not teaching them how. Because you're saying, oh, they're so busy, though, making the toast. Give me a freaking break. We can do better than that. So this is, this is one of those things where sales training should be compulsory. It should be, it should be a standard, part of the process. The greatest companies do sales trainings every single week. I can tell a sales culture in a second. Yeah. How often do you do sales trainings and role play trainings within your sales team? Most of the time, the answer is, once every few months, which means at once every 6 months, if that.
Right.
That's what that means.
Twice a year, if you're
Yeah,
lucky.
it's like the guy that got pulled over and the officer said, "How many have you had tonight?" And, a couple. And they had, 2 6-packs. That's what they meant by a couple, right?
Right. Yep.
And so, come on, I mean, we can do a lot better. The great ones, they have some type of sales training literally every single week.
Wow.
The decent ones are having a good training once a month. Mm-hmm. But yet we will sit there and we'll spend a mountain on technology when the problem, again, comes down to skills and a deficiency in skills.
Yeah.
Right? That's the big issue that we see over and over and over again. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Sales training as a whole is a lost art in the world of business today.
It totally is. And it's like anything in life, the more that you practice, the more that you train, the better you're going to be on game day. And that's just the bottom line. And I think too, it plays into the marketing team as well. Because you said something earlier, and we do this here at Impact too, where we watch sales calls. We review what we call game tape. And the things that unearths, it was so strange and foreign at first, because traditional marketing teams, like I never watched sales calls ever in my previous engagements, and starting to watch them now, the things that you learn about clients, the questions that they ask, the things that sort of like happen on those calls, that's what drives the content that we create. And it's completely shifted how we do what we do. Do you think that happens in a lot of organizations?
No, it doesn't happen in many at all.
Really?
I mean, that's definitely less than 5%.
Wow.
Of marketing teams consistently review sales calls. I mean, that's actually very rare.
Yeah.
It's something we do at Impact, and as you mentioned, and what's powerful about that too, it gives you a greater sense of empathy, not just for the customer, for the salesperson, because now you see, wow, this is I don't know what I would have said right there. I don't know how I would have handled that.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. The sales department needs to empathize with marketing and vice versa. That's going to be key to any type of alignment. Mm-hmm. And that's why this is so powerful. Yeah, so I'd absolutely recommend that everyone does that. And then, of course, today, because we've got AI tools that can even tell you, go so far as to tell you your good habits, your bad habits, and analyze you real time in terms of things like your posture and your energy and your lack of a smile or whatever the thing is.
It's unbelievable.
It's really stunning. Mm-hmm. What we have at our fingertips today. But I do want to stress, I would always prefer training over tools, right? The tools don't fix the actual issue if there's no system of training, a culture of training, and of personal development in place.
Yeah.
Once you have that culture, then tools, man, they can really make a big difference. But tools themselves, they don't fix the actual problem.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think they do. So they invest a lot of money in tools. It even happens in our world. So I'm a video professional. I can't tell you how many people don't have the proper training, the fundamentals of framing and lighting and exposure, but they'll go buy a $100,000 camera and then they're like, hey, I have a really nice camera, so I clearly know what I'm doing. And that's not always not always true. So
it's the treadmill that's a clothes hanger in your bedroom, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
We think buying the treadmill will now motivate me to use said treadmill. That doesn't last very long. It's got to be intrinsic. And, I wish those that were listening to this right now could really understand what it's like to have a true culture of training and personal development within sales and marketing. And I include marketing in that as well. Like, it's great to have marketing do role play trainings. It's amazing to do that, because then they're forced further to empathize with sales, right? That's why it's so stinking powerful. And oftentimes the communications of an effective, let's say, role play, they can teach you how to write better copy. So much of the psychology of selling, of communication, it bleeds into marketing every bit as much as it bleeds into a sales conversation. A lot of folks don't necessarily understand that. And that's why, I talk all the time about communication, but I'm generally speaking about it as a principle. Therefore, it affects sales, it affects marketing, it affects leadership every single time.
Yeah. No, it affects the whole company. And there's an empathy that it creates inside of the culture, because marketing starts to relate and understand the struggles with sales and vice versa. And it just really creates, this symbiosis that everyone's on the same team, one team, one dream. Everyone's like really trying to achieve the same thing. So it's
and it goes beyond just having words on a wall that say teamwork, right? Because what is a word on a wall unless you're doing the thing? And that's why you've got to put these systems in place that force, yes, I said the word, force integration between the departments. And if you have that and you stick to it, then all of a sudden you're going to see that you're going to get dramatically better results.
Extremely well said, Marcus. Thank you for all your insights when it comes to sales and marketing and bridging that gap so that they work together as a revenue squad, how you can get leadership bought in. It's just really great talking with you. So any last thoughts, anything we want to leave our listeners with before we wrap up here?
Look, you might think you don't need this. This is going to be a rock in your shoe until you get it out. If anybody's ever had a little rock, it can be the smallest of rocks in your shoe.
Yeah.
And you think, I don't feel like taking my shoe off right now. This is such a pain. You take a few more steps and you're like, nope, I've got to take my shoe off and get this rock out. Yeah. It's just one of those rocks that you've just got to get out because it's going to be an impediment on you reaching your potential until you address the problem. So go out there, form a revenue team, eliminate the silos, create that culture of training and personal development. You do those things, you're going to be off to the races.
I love it. Marcus, thanks again for your time. For people listening, if they have any follow-up questions, how can they get in touch with you?
You can always email me at marcus@marcussheridan.com. That's my website, marcussheridan.com. If you want me to come speak at your event, come speak to your team, happy to do that as well. And make sure you connect with me on the LinkedIn because I'm pretty good on the LinkedIn. So check it out over there.
Indeed.
Make sure we're connected.
Awesome. Marcus Sheridan, everybody. I'm Alex Winter. You're listening to Endless Customers, and we will see you on the next episode.